Presenting, sharing a session on building savings avoidance program, please welcome Anthony T.J. Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow, come on in, settle down, relax, get a cup of coffee. Oh, there's only water. Hopefully everybody's not going to fall asleep because it's right after lunch, so I'll try to make it entertaining as I can. So this presentation is really about a model of building a program, not the model of a program, because everybody consumes cloud differently. So it's going to be a little different for each of you, but the goal is really to take this information and adopt it within your own organization. Now, some of the stuff that you're going to see today is in a little bit of a spreadsheet format, so maybe a little bit of eye squinting, but we're looking to open source all of the information to building this program through the FinOps Foundation so that everybody can take advantage of it. So if you have some things that you have built around a program, hopefully this can augment that and give you a way to approach it. So I'm from Box, as the slide says. So is anybody a Box customer here? Awesome, awesome. I'm just going to assume you love the software at this point. Ooh, no worries. So Box is a cloud content provider. So you would store documents in a secure fashion. You can use a workflow for it. You can have an e-signature on it. And it really makes sure that you're able to do that. How many of you are working on a cloud sustainability program? Okay, not too bad. So a little factoid here. You can use Box. Instead of using an attachment, you actually send a link. By replacing the attachment with a link within Box, it's a 20-watt savings for every gig of storage. And so we have some customers that use Box just to reduce their CO2 and save energy because it's such a huge savings based upon 100 people, 500 people, 1,000 people or more in the organization. So believe it or not, Box can be a cloud sustainability solution if you want it to. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the distinction between what is a savings and what is an avoidance. And then we're going to talk about what is a kind of an optimization recommendation between what you would get through a tool and then what you would do if it's not from a tool. We're going to talk about how to build your categories, the source of the optimization recommendations. We're going to go through a detailed review of our program process. We're going to go through a tactic modeler. So what's a tactic modeler? It is a list of tactics that we have. We have over 140. I'm only going to show maybe 20 here, that help you look at what level of maturity you're at and what optimizations possibilities you can have. Then we're going to go through some reporting and how we take the reports of the information and then present it to management. So cost savings. So cost savings is really kind of defined as things that you work on today and you're going to optimize that for today and you're going to end up with a savings from that optimization. If you look at spend avoidance, it's about future workloads and not spending that money that you would have spent on those future workloads. So kind of a distinction between savings and avoidance. So one is present, working on what you've already done, and then basically the avoidance is anything in the future. So I just want to kind of get that as a setting. Let's try that again. So potential recommendations. So an example of this, you have a tool. The tool says you can save $500,000 by doing these things. The reality is you're not going to save $500,000. You're going to talk about it with the service owner and then say, oh no, I can't do that. We're ready for an upgrade. I can make this maybe $200,000. And then when they actually do it, it ends up being $100,000. So if you take that at face value, that's a problem. So we call it potential recommendations prior to reviewing it with the service owner. And then when it becomes a validated recommendation, that means the service owner has reviewed it, they've accepted the recommendation, and they've given you a timeline and stuff like that. So they have a commit, right? So we're going to talk about the commit portion of this. So these are categories that we have. We have 9 categories built into the tactic modeler, of which 5 are direct savings and 4 are indirect savings. You know there's a video that they're going to put out with this, but I appreciate the pictures. So the first one is a resource optimization, right? Basic resizing, basic kind of stuff around that. And then spend commits, whether it's an RI, savings plan, a CUD, whatever that is for you guys. Strategic SRE and architecture. So what we find, so we're in the middle of a migration closing out at the end of this quarter. And what we found during that migration, we found the opportunities to re-architect. And so that would go under this category. Governance and policies. One of the things that we've also recognized is you will run out at some level of resizing. You'll run out of high-end, high-value recommendations for optimizations. The next step that you should be looking at is policies, right? We call it stopping stupid. So if you put policies in place, right, you don't have to optimize it down the road because you've already given them the restriction or the guardrails around what they can do. And so policies become that big issue for you to work on. And then procurement. So this is really more of the avoidance stuff, the future stuff, because once you understand your consumption, right, you understand how you're going to rebuild your next relationship with your contract, because you should have your contract reflect your consumption of the cloud. So if you find out that you're consuming this service more and more over time, you want to negotiate a better rate for that. So that's where procurement comes into this, and we can actually save on the next negotiations with procurement, hopefully doing their job and negotiating a lower price. The other ones are relatively small. Gamification is a big one for me because a lot of people look at gamification as a way to incent yes and no, right? So I was speaking to a couple of people last night, and their gamification is related only to Q4. Because during Q1, Q2, Q3, people can gamify the process, so they have an incentive, Hall of Fame, Hall of Shame. But for Q4, they're going to save it for Q1. So they're not going to do it in Q4. So that's when you bring out other incentives for them for Q4. So those are just ways that gamification can work for you. So we know the categories. Now, what are the sources of the opportunities that you have? So you have the normal trusted advisor kind of cost management console stuff where you can look at and get recommendations directly from the CSP. You obviously have tools that I spoke about, and there's a number of fantastic tool providers and platform providers out there. But we also have one called Curated. So these are part of our capacity engineering teams. And the capacity engineers look at the spend, they look at what we're doing, and they make separate recommendations that are outside of what you would find in a tool or from this provider. And usually those are the higher ones that we look at. And they can be much more complex to execute, but those are what we call the curated list. And we manage that on a one-to-one basis, meaning that we will follow up with the service owner for this recommendation, and we'll assign a person to ensure that that moves forward. The next one is service owners. So these are the developers. On their own, they're finding opportunities for optimization. They've recognized we've had a conversation. You have too much spend. Your budget was X. You're spending Y. I need you to go do something about that. Right? We don't always have that recommendation for them. We're asking them to figure that out. And if they're financially aware DevOps, then yes, they should be able to figure that out. But sometimes they're not. Last one is strategic initiatives. So let's say that we want to move workloads from one provider to another. That would be a strategic initiative, right? Most of us, I think, are multi-cloud, right? Hands up if you're multi-cloud? Yeah, that's a lot of people, okay. So those are things that we look at to say, is there a better price over here than over here? Is there better, platform as a service opportunities over here than over here? And so you should be looking at comparing those on an ongoing basis from a FinOps perspective to look at how your unit costs are playing out, what does the service look like, and can you actually use it? And feel free to ask any questions. I think we got time. So what does our program look like? So we track everything across these 6 phases. So we know our sources of the information. And so once we come up with a recommendation, we call it an idea. I love accompaniment, thank you. It's great. Well, okay. So we have an idea that comes up, right? And so what we do is we talk to the service owner that it's related to. Okay. Let's do a little dance, yeah. It's okay, even if it is. Even if it is. It's good music, we're good. So we do the analysis with the service owner, determine if this is really a valid recommendation. So we go from our kind of potential, and then we convert this to a valid recommendation at this point. And that's when we get the commit from the service owner to actually perform the resolution to that particular opportunity. And we do two things with that. We not only ask for costs, but we ask for unit, because we forecast in units, and then we convert the unit forecast, apply a unit cost, and that's how we get our budget. Right, so we do everything, because every unit will have a different price to it, right? Talk about compute, there's 6 or 7 different costs for compute. So we do it by unit, and that helps us along. So we ask for the unit, and then we ask for the dollar. So they've committed to do it. We consider it in progress at that point, and they typically have 30 to 90 days, depending on the complexity. Hey, echo too, cool. So once it's completed, we do a validation. So what's the validation? We actually validate whether their estimated savings by unit and cost was accurate. And why we do that is because we want them to be better at forecasting. We want them to be better. So we provide the feedback back to them, say, no, you said you were going to do 200, no, it's actually $50,000. Where's the disconnect? So this process allows us to go through from idea to validation relatively quickly. And that's the most important thing, is to crunch through these as fast as you can. So we use Jira mostly to track that. We do have a sheet that I'm going to show you in a few minutes. And then we'll talk about how we've developed beyond the sheet. And the sheet is what we're going to then go through. So this is the tactic modeler. So we have a couple categories here: container right fitting and governance and policy. I kind of shrunk everything so it fits. I know it's a little bit of an eye chart. But these are things you should be doing with this, right? So these are potential tactics that you can employ within your own organization. And like I said earlier, this is just a list, not the list, right? So you look at how you're consuming the cloud and create your own list of opportunities that you should be looking at. Now, once you start running out of things that are easy to do, obviously you have the more complex things that are left, right? And some of these are complex. If you look at the middle column that says FinOps phase, so 1, 2, and 3, so this is like the crawl, walk, run kind of thing, right? You will not be able to do anything in 2 and 3 if you're still in 1, simply because you haven't consumed that service, you're not doing it, you don't have the process in place or the best practices in place. So those are things to think about as you go through this and see if this works for you. Policies are one of my favorite things, especially lately. The challenge is this all fits into how do you manage operations. So cloud ops is a big part of this as well. So this goes back to how are you interfacing from a FinOps perspective to the different teams within your organization, and how are you coordinating how these things run? Because you can save money by doing stuff in off hours, right? Instead of doing everything in one. You can also save things in different ways, but we can talk about that later. So this is what we're going to open source to the community, is this list. Now next to this list, this is just part of the list. On the side of this first section, we have budget, potential, forecast, actuals, and missed. So now we're tracking what's actually happening with these opportunities. And this is super important, especially the missed. Why did we miss? Why did we not save that extra 150 from the 200 that ended up being 50? So we start looking at, was it a miscalculation of the savings? Was it a business issue that said we couldn't migrate or couldn't do something along that? Was there a stop in production or migration of production? Whatever that ends up being, we need to track the miss. And then next to that is we're going to tie that particular optimization to a tool vendor or some type of attributed verification. So what was it, a tool? Was it somebody went through Cost Explorer and manually went through and said, this is what we're doing. You assign a person, and sometimes there's somebody that owns the tool that you want to manage to, or sometimes whoever managed the service owner that manages the application or the workload. And you can put whatever else you want on there. So this is just kind of an example of what you can do. But all of this is in that same line, right? So I have this optimization that I'm tracking these numbers to, and then who owns it. There's always a way to go back to somebody and say, what the heck happened? Or, congratulations, you're the best this month, right? So these are some examples that you would do. This is Kubernetes termination for compute node fitting. So the actions from each of these tactics will give you the opportunity to now continue to build on that reduction, right? So this is just one example. So as you go through these actions, you're tightening and tightening the ability to do stupid less and less. You're giving them the opportunity to understand what the ramifications of the decisions are, and these are the actions that we're going to take to get it back in alignment with our budget or our forecast. And I have another one here. So this was crawl phase, maturity, and this is walk phase. So now you start putting real policies in place, like so the second one, enforce quantity, size limits, and non-production using policies. You know, we, as a best practice, we have, big table. And the best practice for big table in GCP is to only have one node for non-production, for each non-production. And we'll find people will create 5, 6, 7, 10 nodes. But to save costs, you should only have one node, and that's the best practice. Even Google says that's the best practice. So we enforce that as best we can through policies. So we have best practices and policies that work closely together to lower the costs at each stage. So things like that, you need to start looking at how is that process working. So this is one of the eye charts. So this is the sheet that we use to manage all the opportunities. So we'll look at things from who's the source, what team does it affect, what's the status or stage, who's the provider, because we are GCP, Azure, AWS, and IBM Cloud. So we want to track all these issues. And sometimes we'll do a full court press on a particular service provider in Azure and just kind of go through as much as we can and then move to the next one. Just depends on the quarter. And we'll talk about the savings level. So we rate savings levels. Anything over 100 is high priority. Anything between 50 and 100 is medium priority. Anything over 10K is a low priority. Now, our spend is probably much larger than most of you. We have almost 600 petabytes of storage. And so we're approaching exabyte next year. And so our spend is fairly high. So you can change those numbers to be whatever you want, but use it to reflect how you want the policies within your organization to track that. And then we have forecasted amount, the committed amount, and the validated amount, which is what we're talking about in that process, right? Who's the driver? We have links to JIRA tickets, and then any comments or anything that we would normally add to that. And we track how old an opportunity is open for. We don't want an opportunity to last longer than a quarter, so we expect that all the service owners will address it within a quarter. If they don't, that becomes another kind of anomaly report that we create. And then we have summary components to this. So we're looking savings by quarter, how does it work against the budget, and then we have executives saying, okay, by what category, because we talked about the categories earlier on, what category is providing us the most amount of savings? And so that's important for us to understand where we should focus. Now, we take that into account with our maturity. So if it's this particular tactic in phase 1, it will not be something in 2 quarters away. It will be something in phase 2, right? Because we've matured out of that, or we've kind of run out of opportunities for optimization. And so we categorize this, and then we total everything up. One of the things we look at is how our flow is happening. So that top measurement is everything stuck in idea or analysis? And so we're managing the flow to ensure that we're moving things along. And if we're not, we try to understand why things are blocked, why it's not happening, and then we work through those processes to make sure that we're able to then provide that solution for them. I think that was the short version. I was trying to do it in 20 minutes and allow a lot of people time for questions. I think that's it, right? There we go. So don't be afraid to ask. I know it's a lot. I just fire-hosed you with the whole program in like 20 minutes.
We got Lindbergh over here.
Yeah, great stuff. One question I had on the data, are you manually compiling this data, or is it being automated? You're using JIRA, obviously.
So we moved away from the sheet to a Confluence page, and we integrated JIRA into Confluence, so we can track within the Confluence page all the JIRA tickets that are open, and we can actually classify them by whatever state they're in, whether it's an idea analysis or whatever. And so that's how we're now managing it, and it seems to be much easier to manage it than from a sheet, because we can see when the opportunity is closed.
I had a quick question. Do all of your savings programs come with its own soundtrack?
They do.
Okay.
It's a new feature we added this quarter.
Question from the bridge between a potential recommendation to validated recommendation. Any lessons you can share or tips to make this process more efficient?
Yeah, so I wish I could say that we're very efficient with the validation. We're working on that, but right now we manually validate all of the savings, which is a pain in the butt. Because it takes us a while to go through, run the reports, make sure we have a comparison to when they were active, when we put the recommendation in, and now we're looking at today's time, and we're making the comparison to see if they actually made it. Now, some of that is through normal attrition, but hopefully it's the action of the opportunity that triggered that savings. Most of the time it is, but sometimes we just have, I'm done with this, I'm going to terminate the stuff. I'm sorry, say it again. It's me. Yeah, it's our team, unfortunately. Yeah.
Hey, TJ. How much would you say the recommendations and the ideas come from the engineering community? And what's that ecosystem look like engineering culture?
Probably less than 20%. You know, we're really trying to get them to engage, because who knows their application better than they do, right? The challenge is do they have the skill set to understand how to optimize it? That's the big challenge. And I would say most of the people don't. You know, a lot of people come into a habit of provisioning what they know and what they've developed over years, but they don't understand there may be a better way, a different way, or that let's not even do that, right?
Can you talk a little bit more about the curated recommendations that you're working on? And are those ones where teams are coming and asking the FinOps team for recommendations specific to them? Or where are those, new ideas coming from across your organization?
Sure. So we as a FinOps team are closely tied to our capacity engineering team. We actually share the same manager. And so the ability to go through and have the capacity engineering team look at different areas within the organization and say, okay, here's an opportunity for us that the service provider, the service owner is not even looking at. And so from a capacity perspective, we're saying, okay, we're doing our analysis. You should be here. You're here. This is an opportunity for savings that comes out of our capacity engineering team that then comes through as a curated model. And they actually manage that ticket all the way through to completion. So if they initiate a particular ticket, then they manage it all the way through. And that becomes this hands-on, one-on-one kind of thing. And usually it's a higher dollar amount than the recommendations.
Hey, over here. I saw you kind of tiering your priority versus spend. Is there any kind of prioritization versus the difficulty to execute on those actions?
I think today, no, we don't have that. But it's definitely something that we want to start looking at. Our program started about 2.5 years ago, and we've had a number of people come in and out. And so our consistency in our skill set and our deliverables have been tied to our staffing. And so it's been a little challenging. Sometimes we move forward, sometimes we move back. So we continue to look at those and try to set our priorities appropriately.
Hey, DJ, you said cost savings and cost avoidance. Can you enlighten us a little bit on the avoidance part of it? Because I would like to know, for example, your workload onboarding piece. How does that look like? Because that's the moment where you would potentially avoid your costs.
Yeah, so a spend commit is an avoidance, right? So you're reducing your costs for future spend from that point forward. We're talking about procurement. We're lowering our unit rate from the negotiations from that point forward. So those are more kind of examples of avoidances versus I'm going to reduce the size or I'm going to terminate this. That would be the savings component. Does that make sense? Okay.
Can you talk a little bit more about your policies to stop stupid, so to say, and like how do you, like maybe teams have platform policies, they have FinOps policies, are they all kind of together, or how do you manage, how do you curate those, what does that look like?
Yeah, the reality is we do have some conflicting policies, right? And so what we try to do is we try to put our policies on things that directly affect the savings, like we will allow only these types of instances to be provisioned. We will look at these things that we can do. You can only provision these set during these business hours, right? And so we look at how to set those policies that will drive the outcome that we want, which is typically savings or avoidance. But the challenge is there are people that can get around certain things, right? So if you put that instance policy in place inside of your pipeline, there are people that can provision outside the pipeline. So you miss those by that policy unless you know you're trying to catch that, right? So we'll do an analysis on the instance types that we want to stop or deny, and then we'll determine who the service owners are, and then we'll directly go to them and say, you can't do this anymore, we're going to watch you. So, yeah. It's not always perfect, but it works. Yes?
So do you have a finance person on your team to help with the budget, the forecast, and the validation of these cost avoidance or cost savings? Or are you having to report to a separate finance team, the corporate FP&A?
That would really be convenient, but no, we don't have that. No, we... Okay, there you go. So no, we actually, FinOps did manage the forecast, but we moved that to capacity engineering because they were focused on capacity. And we only do in units now. We did it in dollars, and now we do it in units. So we have the forecasting within our organization, and then we communicate the budget to SP&A. So once we take our unit cost, we times it by the units we have, and then we give that to them. So, but they have their own model for budgets, right? So that's the challenge, is do we align? And I would say we're within 1% to 2% every month now. So pretty much aligned.
Okay.
We got 2 minutes.
No, Jacob. All right, last question, 2 minutes.
Amazing talk, by the way, and I love the fact that the program that you described here can also be really applied to existing programs and sort of used to augment them, so to speak. And just a general question, you mentioned the fact that a lot of these resources will be made open source. Do you guys have a specific date or specific plan for doing that?
We don't have a date. I'm hoping sometime before Q4, so the next 3-4 months, once we figure out what open source license we're going to use and how that's all going to work out. Yeah, once that's resolved, I'm not quite sure where we're going to publish that. It may be under the new working group that does usage optimization. So we may kind of integrate underneath that and provide that as one of the sprints to publish that out.
Sounds perfect. Best of luck with it, and thanks
you.
again.
Appreciate it.
We'll have the sessions recorded, and if we're able to, we will post them online. TJ is always haunted by ghosts when he presents. Last year,
you can't fail.
So it is quite funny that the ghost started playing music today. So we apologize for that. Last year there was a technical issue as well,
and the camera didn't work.
The camera didn't work last year. So, but TJ is a very friendly person. Actually, click your next slide where people can find you. You can absolutely try to reach out for TJ for more information. You can meet up with him at
the Chalk Talk tomorrow.
Chalk Talk tomorrow.
So we started a working group called Social Aspects of FinOps because there was a lot of people covering the tech part, but most of our work as FinOps practitioners is the interaction and relationships that we build. And so we started a working group to specifically talk about building trust. How do you build out these relationships? What happens if it doesn't work? How do you recover? How do you recover from breaking trust, right? And so these are all things that we found that were really important in your day-to-day lives as practitioners. So we thought we'd build a working group. We actually do have our Sprint 1 done. Should be on the website for building trust and relationships within FinOps. It should be somewhere on one of the links on one of the web pages. Absolutely. And yeah, so you can find me there for sure. Tomorrow.
Absolutely. Let's give TJ and his ghost a round of applause. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for watching that session. I'm sitting here in San Diego right after FinOps X. We hope you join us next year here live 2024. In the meantime, please subscribe to the channel and join the community. Get involved, join the summits, get in a working group, and don't forget to get FinOps certified. Because next year here in San Diego for FinOps X, it's going to be twice as big. Come join the party. Come meet your people. Welcome home.